I was pursuing a master's degree at the University of Virginia when I was invited to go on a trip to Thailand. Now, this wasn't for vacation per se, but rather to volunteer in a residential shelter for victims of commercial and sexual exploitation. There were a dozen reasons not to go. I was a full-time student, living on student loans, working part-time to make ends meet, and I had a looming capstone project hanging over my head. But something deep inside me felt pulled to go, and in a momentary leap of faith, I booked a ticket. 3 weeks later, I was on a plane to Thailand. After 24 hours of travel, jet-lagged and mildly disoriented, I felt my heart racing as I followed a hand-drawn map down the side streets of Chiang Mai. The heat and humidity was oppressive, and the sweat was running down my back. I said a silent prayer as I knocked on the door of the shelter. Joy opened the door and led me inside and began to introduce me to the shelter residents. Ranging in ages from 8 to 17, most who had suffered horrific abuse or crimes, many who had been trafficked against their will. Many of the girls were able to return to their homes or be repatriated to their countries, but others were not for a variety of reasons. So this short-term shelter also offered long-term care, health care, legal support, education, and a safe place to heal and grow. I quickly fell into a routine providing the most basic care to the girls. I walked with them to school, I helped with homework, I taught first aid, we did chores alongside one another, and I would cook meals in the evenings with them. And little by little, one by one, I began to understand their story of how they came to reside in the shelter. Most were heartbreaking in a way that I had never comprehended. Just the week prior, 4 girls from a Lahu village in northern Thailand had arrived. At first glance, they looked to be maybe 7 or 8 years old, but their dental exam suggested that they were well into their teenage years. Years of being fed methamphetamines to fuel their work and their family's rice paddies had profoundly stunted their growth and development. The night prior to my arrival, 2 young girls from neighboring Myanmar had been trafficked to a local brothel. The program manager was called when they arrived at a hospital. In an attempt to escape, they jumped out of a second-story window, landing on their hands and knees and breaking their wrists on the impact. I called my parents that night to check in, and when they asked how the trip was going, I just sobbed. I didn't have the words to explain its impact on me. I was feeling this complex mix of emotions: anger, grief, despair, guilt, helplessness, but also profound gratitude for the experience. Joy became a near constant by my side, supplementing language barriers, explaining cultural differences, and using her deadpan sense of humor to entertain us all. Joy's own story was one that was all too common. Her mother died at a young age, her father was in prison, and so she essentially grew up in the shelter. Growing up in the shelter, she became the big sister, the role model, the best friend, and really the mother figure, particularly to the younger girls. Joy knew when someone wasn't feeling well, and she would tend to them with care. She would dry tears, mediate arguments, braid hair, and in the evening she would read bedtime stories to the younger girls. She did all of this with a sense of wisdom and grace of someone decades older than herself, and I found myself just in awe of her selflessness and her depths of caring, particularly amidst her own loss and her own challenges. I felt something start to shift inside me. As I prepared to depart Thailand, I began to question, how do I go back to my normal life? My normal life where my biggest stressor is a difficult shift at the hospital or cramming for an upcoming exam. It just seemed so silly, so trivial. And how could I look away from all that I had just seen and just experienced? My first day back on campus, I marched into my advisor's office and I firmly declared my intent to change my major with just months to go before graduation. She firmly but gently placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "You will finish this program, and then you can pursue your dream." So in the weeks and months that followed, I began to research and read as much as I could around the issue of human trafficking, and particularly its impact on Southeast Asia. I sent hundreds of emails connecting program managers and individuals doing research on how do you protect and how do you rehabilitate and repatriate victims of human trafficking. I spoke at fundraisers, I attended university functions, and I eventually expanded my volunteer work to Cambodia. But I always returned to Thailand. And on those subsequent trips to Thailand, Joy and I were inseparable. Friends would joke that we were each other's shadow when we were around each other. But for me, it was so much more than that. You see, Joy grounded me in a way that I had never known. She anchored my values and she expanded my understanding of the world. With time, my trips to Thailand became less frequent. Back in the US, I moved cities and started down a new career path. I was still volunteering, albeit on boards and not necessarily on the front lines. And Joy and I were in touch, particularly on milestone holidays, but it had been years since I had seen her. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, my phone rang, and it was Joy. And the conversation went like this. "Sabadi ka, Emily, I'm getting married next month. Please, can you come to my wedding?" "Joy, that is such fantastic news. I'm so happy for you. I don't think there's any way I could travel next month, but I promise I'll make it up to you." "Ka, Emily, when you come, I can pick you up at Chiang Mai airport, and then we can go to my village and see my family after the wedding." "Joy, I don't think you understand. I just started a new job. This is not possible. I'm so sorry." "Ka, Emily, I cannot wait to see you." And then the call went silent. Several weeks later, I was back on a plane to Thailand, this time for a wedding. When I arrived at Joy's apartment the morning of the wedding, a huge grin broke out on her face. "I knew you would come," she said. I looked her in the eyes and said, "I knew you could understand me." And she threw back her head and laughed. Then, with the nervous energy of a bride on her wedding day, she outlined the plans for the ceremony and my role and how she envisioned the day playing out. And it dawned on me in that moment that my role at her wedding was so much more than just a guest at the wedding. For that day, it was my responsibility to show up for her. And it was a tremendous responsibility, but also a huge honor to do so. Today, Joy is a pastor in a local church. She's happily married and kept busy raising 4 young sons. Years ago, I transitioned my career to humanitarian aid and international development. Also married and enjoying the sometimes joys and sorrows of raising 3 college-age kids, I credit my sometimes softer, gentler moments to the lessons that I learned from Joy. When I look back on my life and all of the defining moments, I realize that initial moment was one that probably defined my path more than anything. And it all started with the leap of faith and a trip to Thailand. Thank you.